Welcome to the Draft Deeper podcast. This is your host, Nathan Grubel. Joining me, as always, is my producer, Kevin Black. And tonight, we have one of my favorite follows on Twitter, social media. You know him at Hawks Draft Nerd, would be Simon Rath. Absolutely fantastic source for any kind of scouting coverage. Obviously, he's a big Atlanta Hawks guy. His Hawks are going against my Philadelphia 76ers right now, where we're in the midst of a great playoff battle. But Simon, how are you feeling about your Atlanta Hawks? How you feeling tonight? You ready to talk some prospects?
Oh, I was so much better about 30 minutes ago. And then this whole DeAndre stuff happened, but I mean, I'm still positive about it.
Yeah, that was a great game last night, and I will say that the Sixers going down to Atlanta, that's going to be a tough two games.
Mhm.
In the club ATL, I believe they call the arena now at this point for the Hawks. But
Yep.
yeah, those are going to be two really tough contests. But I'm excited to watch some more of those games for sure. But on this podcast, we've been doing some NBA playoff coverage and we've been kind of doing some quick hits on all those series, obviously given some of our predictions, but we're going to veer back on track a little bit here with some draft talk. And Simon, I'm excited to have you on. I've been saving some of these guys to talk about, specifically to have you on, because guys like Sharif Cooper, Bones Highland, these are guys that I wasn't necessarily up on that much coming into the year. Obviously, Sharif came into the year a little late because of some other things going on off the court. But just in terms of coming into the preseason, I didn't really know a lot about these guys. I didn't know what to expect from them. But you were high on them from the start. So that's why I definitely wanted to have this conversation with you, my friend. Being able to have somebody from social media on just to have some of these conversations. That's what we're all about here at Draft Deeper. So without further ado, I want to jump right in. We'll start with Sharif Cooper, the listed at 6'1", 180-pound point guard out of Auburn. Before I kind of give a little bit of my spiel and how I feel about him and where I'm at right now, Simon, I just want you to kind of start with what were you so excited about with Sharif before the year even started, and why did you think that he was going to succeed the way that he did at Auburn?
So I watched him in high school and his passing was just beyond elite. Like I thought that he was the Trey Young passer, a LaMelo Ball passer. Loved the court vision. Just loved how confident he was playing all the time. Um, yeah, I love freaking everything about him.
So he definitely proved to be an impressive scorer and assist man. When you're talking about 20 points per game and a little over 8 assists per game in that year for Auburn. Again, a short season. Didn't even play the entire length of the year, but he was able to come in and immediately make an impact with that Auburn team. You could just tell the second he stepped on the court, he certainly brought a different kind of winning personality because he just made everyone better. And that was absolutely accentuated in the types of passes that he looked to make consistently. Um, what really sets up that passing for me is I said it very early on that he probably has the best handle for a college guard that I've seen since Kyrie Irving Duke days. Going that far back,
Hmm.
like that's how good his handle and his creativity level is off the bounce. And when you combine that with his cerebral passing, his court vision, the fact that like Trey Young, I think Trey Young is a very apt comparison for somebody like Sharif. You see Trey Young able to make all of these passes and zip them, and they're on target no matter where they're going. It's very rare that Trey misses a pass, and he throws that ball off target. And you see that same passing ability with Sharif as well. He's just an incredible setup guy. Obviously, he has some of his weaknesses. You can point to his scoring efficiency. He only shot 39% from the field and 23% from three-point range. And I think those were two of the biggest knocks that I had on him. But the other knock that I really had on him, and I'll let you speak to some of this, Simon, since you're the big Hawks guy. You're obviously a Trey Young fan, and some of that's going to bleed over into Sharif's evaluation. But when you watch somebody like him, you get concerned a little bit in terms of so he's a guy who strictly needs the ball in his hands almost at all times, and
Yep.
even more so a little bit than Trey, because Trey's deep shooting range and his ability to, you can send him off screens and such like Steph Curry, where you can have him shooting off the move and you can find other ways to get him involved in the offense. I think Sharif Cooper's shot's going to improve, and maybe that's something that he can learn how to do down the line. But at least for now, you're going to want the ball in his hands to take advantage of his strengths, and you're going to want him to control that offense pretty much full time. So, how do you kind of feel about that evaluation, Simon? Does that give you a little bit of a cause to pause at all, or have you seen enough Trey Young success with the Atlanta Hawks now to the point where that's not really as much of a concern for you? You're fine putting the keys, giving the keys to Sharif in a role like that if you're drafting him.
I mean, I would definitely be fine just giving him the keys. His the shooting is not going to be as good as Trey Young, but I like that he took about 5 threes per game. So I mean, the confidence is still there. So I would much rather have someone shoot 22% and still take them than shoot 30% and just not take them. So the shooting is not really that big of a concern for me. I mean, the form is not great. I mean, the form is that definitely it needs to be tinkered with, but I mean, I don't think that'll really be too big of the issue.
Well, he definitely has to quicken up his release because he
Yep,
doesn't necessarily get high off the ground when he shoots
and
the
jump
ball.
and
Yeah.
jump. I mean,
Yeah, he's kind of like a set shooter for a small guard, and that generally doesn't bode well, especially when he's going to run into situations like Trey, where we just saw it last night. Somebody like the 76ers are going to throw a bigger defender on somebody like him if he
yep,
grabs that much of the defense's attention at some point. Like if you're having to shoot over somebody who's like 6'9", 6'10", or even like a smaller way, like a 6'6", 6'7" wing with a longer wingspan, you're going to have to be able to knock those shots down. So yeah, I agree. He's definitely going to have to tinker with the shooting form a little bit, but the 83% or almost 83% shooting from the free throw line on a heavy volume, that was something that jumped out to me and surprised me throughout the season, was how creative he was at being able to draw fouls. And it's something that you don't always see in younger guards. That's generally something that's developed a little more when they actually get to the NBA. But Sharif's able to do that now. And that definitely adds really good scoring value. And the other thing that he didn't do in his first few games, but he ended up showcasing it more as the season went along, was he does have a floater. And you and I both know, watching Trey Young, how deadly that floater is when he's able to penetrate off the initial screen up top in a pick and roll set. If anybody's playing drop coverage on that, you know that you kind of have to have a floater, especially as a small guard, to be able to score effectively if you're not going to be able to get all the way to the rim. Are you confident in Sharif's floater? You think that's definitely going to be something that's going to translate right away in the league?
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that his touch is pretty good right now, but over time it'll get better. And a small point guard's the floater is, I would say, the most important shot to have for someone his size. So I do think that'll come along.
So in terms of like where specifically you would draft him, Simon, where is he currently at on your board, and where would you feel comfortable taking him? Because first for me, it's taken me quite a while to get on the Trey Young bandwagon, if you will. I was not as high on him coming out of college because of a lot of those concerns that I thought he really had to dominate the ball. I didn't really see much off ball value from him, but at the same time, I think I underrated that passing and that playmaking ability to the point where he was going to come in. He wasn't just about putting up numbers and jacking up shots. Maybe that's how he was initially his rookie year, trying to just make a name for himself. But you see the evolution this year where he runs that team incredibly well. And I think Sharif's going to be able to step in and kind of have that impact definitely from day one. How much of the scoring comes along, if he's going to be able to put up 16, 18 points a game in his rookie year, that much remains to be seen. But I definitely think the assists, I think he's going to be much better taking care of the ball. His assist to turnover ratio, I think, will be there, and he's going to be a floor general, someone you can trust. So I'm higher, at least I'm moving higher on Sharif than I was with Trey initially coming out of college. But where would you feel comfortable taking him?
So I have him 10th
Okay.
on my board, but I would probably not draft him 10th. I think he has a long term upside, but it just all depends on the team. So New York would be a just awesome fit in my opinion. Um, Boston would be good because then he's got two wings who can cover up for his defense. Um, yeah, I would probably say those two are my two favorite fits right now.
Oh, if he slips to Boston, I think they
That'd
would
be awesome.
absolutely they would pull the trigger on it 100%. I
Hmm.
think I agree with that because he would. They, I know Danny Ainge isn't the president of basketball operations there anymore, given recent events, but that organization in general seems to like these smaller point guards who just have that innate feel for
Yep.
making others better around them. I mean, you saw them pull the trigger in drafting Peyton Pritchard, and
Hmm.
that's actually worked out pretty well for them. I had him valued as somebody who definitely wanted to make a priority in the second round, but I didn't have him as like a first round guy because I didn't know how well he was going to be able to run an offense as a floor general. I knew that he was a scoring point guard. He could shoot with deep range. I didn't know how he would balance that playmaking to shooting, but Sharif won't have that problem. He's going to come in and look to make others better first. And yeah, with Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum next to him, opposite sides of the wing, absolutely, he would be a fantastic fit in Boston and New York as well. That's a great point about the
And
Knicks
Time
too.
Lord too. Time Lord covering the paint. Mitchell Robinson. I
Yeah,
think it's
but
perfect.
yeah, yeah, you're right. Either destination, he would have a lob target as well, and that's definitely something that's accentuated Trey Young this year too. Was not only having one lob threat in John Collins, but having another pure center with definitely the size to be able to come off that initial screen, roll, and then catch that lob. And Clint Capella, I think the addition of Clint Capella has definitely taken Trey's game to another level as well. So yeah,
Yep.
good point. Having somebody like that would be really good for Sharif. Um, yeah, I'm a little surprised that I've come around on him, but watching Trey in the playoffs do what he's doing to some of these defenses, really all this entire year, but especially here in the playoffs, that level of maturity that he's shown, that poise that we've already seen Sharif have in not too much more than a handful of college games. I mean, what he was able to come in and do on a shortened season, not having a full year to be able to gel with his teammates, but come in like he's been playing with them for years. That really impressed me and stood out to me. So I'm becoming a lot more of a Sharif Cooper fan. I think that as we get closer to the draft process, I really feel like somebody's going to take him in the lottery. I don't know who, we're all we're gonna have to wait and see in terms of who
Yeah.
actually falls in what order in the draft. But yeah, I feel really good about somebody taking a shot on him in the lottery, and he will be somebody that I will like revisiting when I end up releasing the draft deeper tiers for 2021. I think he's going to be in a really good conversation there as well. Let's move on to another one of your guys, Bones Highland. I think Simon, you actually have some information to share with my audience regarding Bones. Why don't you share that information with us?
I do. So I got his official the measurements. He is 6'4". He's got a 6'10" a wingspan, and he is up to um where is it? He is up to 175 pounds, which is up from 158 when he got to college, which is just awesome. And
Impressive.
I was told that his goal is to get up to 180 by the combine. So that would be pretty great if he could do that. And he's got a max vert of 35 feet or 35 inches, not feet.
So definitely, you can already tell that he's been working incredibly hard on his body in the off season. He obviously heard the criticism around that some people think at his size that he wouldn't be able to withstand contact or the vigor of the NBA really well. I don't necessarily see that as too much of a problem for someone of his ilk. I think he's going to primarily be a perimeter creator and shooter anyways. I don't necessarily see him taking a ton of guys off the dribble or going to some of those scoring moves around the basket as often as he sort of had to do at
Hmm.
times for VCU. I think a team's going to draft him as more of a shooting specialist, but just knowing that he's putting in the work already to improve upon what others maybe have given him critique on, that does speak well to me. I love guys who are absolutely putting in the work to get better, no matter what the cost, whatever they have to do, and that improved physicality is obviously only going to help him at the next level as long as he's putting on that muscle in the correct way, which I certainly believe that he is. Being an NBA draft prospect, I have good confidence that he's getting the right advice and the right strength and conditioning training from the right people. So that will certainly help his game. But what obviously stands out to everybody about Bones Highland is his incredible shooting range. Like you we're talking about someone who pulls up from the logo, right? Like that's how deep that he's able to convert shots. And what impresses me about those shots the most is that sometimes with shooters, you want to judge their makes based on how that ball actually goes through the rim. Is it
Hmm.
clanking around the rim? Is it a smooth swoosh? How's that ball ultimately falling through the basket? And he, no matter where he's shooting it from, like I never hear that ball clanking around the rim. He is as smooth of a shooter in this draft class as they come. So that's already one skill that we know is going to translate at the next level. Now, is he a pure scorer? That much, I don't know if I necessarily have a full formulated opinion on Simon, but I wanted to get your perspective on that. How much shooter versus scorer do you think that Bones Highland is, since you've been a little higher on him than certainly somewhere earlier in this year? How do you kind of view that balance, and what do you think his role is going to be at the next level?
Um, I think currently he's probably just going to be a shooter going into the league, but with him adding the more weight, I think he could definitely be a three level scorer. Um, his so actually, I looked it up and let me pull this up real quick. Last year he only took um he scored 0.87 points per possession around the basket on 41 possessions. And this year he had 65 possessions and he scored 1.13 points per possession. So he's gotten much better around the basket. So that's just a great sign for me.
Yeah, the other thing that really speaks to me in terms of his potential to become more of a scorer and not just a shooter is how efficient he was in those types of play types. So he was in the
Hmm.
96th percentile this year in spot ups, and the 85th percentile in isolation. So if he's able to get somebody on an island, he has enough in his bag where he's able to create separation, shake a guy off the bounce, and still get that shot off. I think that it's very encouraging to see his improvement around the basket. Again, I don't know how much he's going to definitely go to that in the NBA, but absolutely being able to score with range from the 3 point, that's going to stretch his defender out. And I do think he's quick enough to definitely get around somebody. And if he's able to pull up in the mid range off of a few dribbles because of how far he's able to bring a defender out, then that's going to give a defense a whole nother can of worms as far as problems. So I definitely agree. I think that all of the tools are there for him to improve and be an efficient scorer, not necessarily just an outside shooter. What gives me a little cause to pause with Highland is that I don't think he's a high level playmaker for others. I think he's much more of a points specialist and not necessarily a playmaker from one of those backcourt spots. How do you feel about his playmaking, Simon? Do you think I might be wrong about that point, or do you have any encouraging things to point to as far as his playmaking?
I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be like a 4 assists per game guy or
Mm.
anything like that. But I also do not think he's just going to be the ball stopper. on offense. So he might just get a lot of the hockey assists. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be like some top tier passer for a guard.
Maybe it's just a little bit of recency bias because I was at the Sixers Hawks game last night and I saw this guy have really good contributions towards the end of the game when Doc actually trusted him to put him in. But the more I watch Bones Highland when I was going back and watching some film today, he reminds me of Shake Milton. They're obviously not the same size.
Yeah.
Shake is 6'6", Bones is somewhere between 6'2" and 6'3", but their ability, how they set themselves up for shots, where they look to score from, the type of moves that they have when they do get into the teeth of that defense and penetrate. Highland reminds me so much of Shake Milton. I don't know what you think about that comp. I don't know if you think that's an apt comp. Um, Simon, what kind of comp would you have for somebody like Bones Highland coming into the NBA?
So my comp is actually a different Sixer. Um,
Okay.
so I was stupid high on this guy last year, Isaiah Joe, and I think that Bones could be a I don't exactly want to say a better Isaiah Joe, but like a more wiggle Isaiah Joe, and I think that's a great comp. They're both about 6'4". They're both about 180, and they both can just shoot from the mid court. So I think that would be the good comp, but Shake's also like fantastic. So
I like that comp too, and I don't know if I was necessarily I don't when you say you were really high on him, where did you have him on your board last year?
I think I had him like early 20s. I think it was.
Okay, because I had him in the late 20s to 30, like the back end of that
Yeah,
first round, but I still had him as a first rounder as well.
yeah.
And I
I
think that
loved
in
him.
time, yeah, he's going to provide value to the Sixers definitely
Yep.
at some point, or if he ends up on another team, things don't necessarily work out in Philly because they have a more tightened rotation, you can say, in heavy quotations, because Doc has still been going to that plenty of bench guys in some of
Oh,
these playoff series here, but yeah, I definitely think that he can provide that same type of value. You didn't want to say like a better Isaiah Joe, but could we say a more well-rounded
yeah.
version of Isaiah Joe,
Yep.
especially if some of that mid-range and pull-up scoring comes to fruition in the NBA like it did in college. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I think if he turns out to be some kind of version of either one of those guys, then that's definitely a valuable NBA guard and somebody who I think for up to this point, I would be really comfortable taking Bones Highland with like an early second round pick. But again, if he ends up being like one of those guys and ends up, especially more like Shake, he could definitely be valued as a first round target. I'm assuming, Simon, that you have him as like a first round target on your board.
I do. I have him 15th.
15th.
I have him 15th.
15th.
Yep. I love him. I think he's going to be fantastic.
So that's kind of like a theme of some of the guys we're talking about on this podcast. I wanted to have you on because everything I see you post on social media, you're kind of agreeing with some of the other scouts I see on there regarding valuing these combo type guards, these score first mentality guards who have proven that they can create their own shot.
Yep.
What yeah,
ISO scores. I love ISO scores.
and for good reason, because those are the types of guards that get shots, especially right now where we are in the playoffs. You kind of have to be able to create your own shot one way
Hmm.
or another. Even if you're more of an off-ball threat, you need to be able to get open first and foremost. And when you catch the ball, you need to be able to get it up quick and in a hurry. And yeah, that's definitely something that Bones doesn't have any problem
Nope.
with. He gets that shot off in a hurry. Does not waste any motion in his mechanics. Again, another guy who I wouldn't say gets too high up off the ground when he's shooting, but with the way that he kind of arcs his shot and the way that he sets himself up to take it before he even ultimately releases and follows through, he catches the ball and gets it up high quick so that he
Hmm.
doesn't have to waste any motion. He's able to get it off in a hurry. So, yeah, definitely somebody who needs to be valued in this draft, whether you have him as like a first round guy, maybe he's even as high as you do, Simon, or yeah, all the way going down to like the early second. Maybe you have him like me, you have him as like a priority second round target guy. Either way, he's definitely going to have a role and he's going to earn a job in the league. So hats off to Bones Highland. He's definitely going to be a threat from 3 point range coming in day one. And if anyone's listened to this podcast before, you know I like guys who can come in and do at least one thing really well, maybe even two things. And this draft is just chock full of guys who have 1 to 2 really solid translatable skills coming into the league. We're seeing a draft that's just as deep as last year's, and that's obviously exciting for us, but it should be exciting for all fans of basketball in general.
Hmm. I agree.
So let's move on to another score first guard. And when I say score first, we got to put heavy emphasis on that in Cam Thomas, the 6'4", 210-pound guard, freshman guard out of LSU. I haven't really shared too many thoughts about him on this podcast, mainly because if anyone out there also listens to Chuck's podcast, the Chucking Darts NBA podcast, he actually had me on as a guest, and we did a pretty good deep dive on Cam Thomas because Chuck is absolutely in love with Cam. I think he still has him as like a lottery level talent. Where are you kind of at on Cam Thomas, Simon? Talk to me about why you like him so much.
So I currently have Cam Thomas ninth on my board
Wow.
because my mindset is give me the guy who can score 20 points, and then just all you got to do is just make him not like a dumpster fire on defense. Just he can just be adequate on the team defense, and then his offense will just make up for it.
Yeah,
So
and
defense, I don't this like this sounds kind of dumb, but I don't exactly care about defense too much, especially for guards. Like all you gotta do is just be decent at the team defense, and I think that's basically the only thing I think about when it comes to guard defense.
so there are encouraging statistics for Cam Thomas defensively by the synergy numbers, and I definitely think that some of these improve. That podcast I did with Chuck, that was roughly like midway through the college season, but I think that Cam definitely improved as the season went on defensively because I know for a fact some of these numbers got better, but we'll get into the offense. But while we're talking about defense, since you brought it up, Simon, so he defended well in play types where you would expect him to be involved in at the NBA level. And what I mean by that is obviously we know the NBA is a heavy pick and roll league, heavy in terms of running guys off screens, getting them open for jump shots. Thomas was in the 91st percentile defending in the pick and roll, defending ball handlers in the pick and roll. He was in the 87th percentile defending spot ups, the 87th percentile defending in post ups, and the 54th percentile defending in handoffs. So essentially, actions that you'd expect there to be heavy screen usage involved. He actually fared decently well when he was giving the effort on the defensive end. Obviously, it gets a little hairy in terms of asking him to play within the team concept and guard consistent movement. He was only in the 14th percentile defending off screens, but again, anyone who's listened to this podcast, they know that every single rookie struggles with defending off the ball coming into the NBA. It's a speed of the game type of thing. Everybody needs to make adjustments when they come in, but can you give the effort to guard somebody one on one? Can you not be completely lost if you get thrown in a pick and roll set? And Cam can definitely hold himself well. He's a smart kid. He knows how to keep himself composed and have really good effort where it counts in play types that definitely matter in the NBA game. But getting into where his real value is offensively, he was in the 99th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, 95th percentile off handoffs, 94th percentile off cuts, and the 84th percentile in spot ups. So what those numbers say to me, Simon, and I'll let you commentate a little more in terms of what you think he's going to be able to do offensively right away at the next level. But those four metrics right there, tailor made all ready to come in and contribute offensively in the NBA. These are things, again, popular play types that he's going to be involved in. Not necessarily the most complicated of play types outside of the pick and roll stuff. Teams can draft him knowing they're going to be able to run him off screens, get him involved in handoff actions, and he's going to be a threat to score the ball as soon as he gets it. So that's definitely encouraging for any NBA team looking to bring him in and kind of plug him into a rotation right away for some instant offense. How do you kind of feel about Cam coming into the NBA from day one?
So his so this is the not a comp. So the no one spaz out about it. But the way he creates space and just gets the shots off, it it almost like the um I just freaking always think of Brad Beal whenever he does that. He can just do the step back and get like 4 feet of space. So that's what just freaking always comes to mind whenever I watch Cam Thomas.
Well, if he ends up anything close to Brad Beal, then he absolutely needs to be
Yeah,
valued as a lottery level talent.
and yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to say he's going to be Beal, but just the way he scores, it always looks like the Brad Beal to me.
No, I see where you're going with even throwing that name out there in terms of someone that Cam Thomas reminds you of, because Brad Beal has turned himself into an incredibly crafty scoring guard, and that wasn't how he was initially viewed coming out of college. I think a lot of people had him on a pedestal, and he was ultimately drafted third overall because of some promise that he offered down the road, and he's lived up to that promise. But he was initially thought of as someone who could definitely stretch the floor from the guard spot and primarily be like a catch and shoot 3 point guy. And nowadays, he's actually, in my opinion, he's better doing everything scoring off the bounce inside the arc and being just a crafty pull up threat overall versus necessarily someone you want catching and shooting the ball from three off those types of looks and doing catch and shoot threes like 10 times a game. You know what I mean? You definitely
Hmm.
want him to have the ball in his hands, taking somebody off the bounce and then kind of letting the defense dictate what he does to score the basketball. And to Cam Thomas's credit as well, we talked about this with Sharif Cooper, but Cam Thomas was another one who had an incredibly high free throw attempt rate per game, and he converted on 88% from the line. So that's just another way that he's going to be able to sort of dictate what the defense does with him. If they play too close to him, they play up on him. He's crafty enough to be able to draw that foul, get to the line. And sometimes with somebody like him who wasn't the most efficient shooter from the field in terms of percentage, you don't want to be giving him open shots necessarily because it can feed into his confidence. He was clearly a volume shooter, a volume shot maker. So the hotter he gets, the worse it's going to be for your defense. But at the same time, if you play too aggressively on him, he's going to figure that out and he's going to find ways to get to the line. And that's another way where if you're highly effective from the line, seeing that ball go through the hoop 2, 3, 4 times, if you've already gotten to the line that much, that also feeds into your confidence as a shot maker overall. So it's really tricky to kind of game plan a defense around Cam because he can score in so many different ways. So you kind of look at him defensively. Well, how do you stop him? You can try and force him to take and make tough shots, but I mean, especially late in the tournament, in the SEC tournament, then in the NCAA tournament, man, Simon, some of those shots that he was making in
Oh,
some of those games, like the one-legged step back deep shots, I was just like,
just beautiful. Oh,
well,
I loved it.
what do you do with this
Right.
guy? I'm like, what do you do with him?
So I looked it up. Brad Beal shot 44, 33, and 77 on 10 shots per game. And Cam Thomas shot 40, 32, and 88 on 17 shots a game. So I think if like he only shot like 13 times per game, I think he would have much better field goal efficiency.
And really, it's like the only way that you stop Cam is like if he stops himself. Like if he
Hmm.
gets a little too shot happy, he takes terrible shots, and you're able to corral some rebounds off those kinds of misses. that's really the only way that you're necessarily stopping him. But he's smart enough to pass out of a double team, and really the playmaking, that was something that Chuck really wanted to hit home when he had me on his podcast, was that Cam Thomas's playmaking at this point is underrated. And
I
that's true
agree.
to an extent. Like he was in the 95th percentile in pick and roll sets, including passes. So clearly, when you put him in a play type where he's forced to make a decision, either score or pass out, depending on the kind of trap that a defense would throw at him, he was able to get the ball away quick enough and efficiently to the open man. So when you throw that into it, it's like, damn, what do you do with him, right? Like
Hmm.
that dangerous of an offensive player, we can talk about any kind of defensive inefficiencies that he might have. We can talk about he's not exactly like an explosive type athlete, but guys who just know how to play the game at a high level and they have so many different wrinkles in their scoring arsenal,
Yep.
generally they're able to figure it out. And the best upside with Cam is that when an NBA team brings him in and they have him running their offense and they're essentially getting him shots that are much more higher quality than just giving him the ball at LSU, putting him on an island and telling him to do everything himself. He won't have to
Yep.
do everything himself at the NBA level. So that's just that we keep heaping praise on Cam, but honestly, for good reason. He's another guy that I've really come around on, and I agree with a lot of people in consensus that he needs to be valued very, very highly as an offensive machine, not necessarily just a scorer, and that only adds to his overall value.
And Brad Beal averaged 2 assists in college, and Cam Thomas is at 1.4. So not bad. I mean, semi similar.
Not bad, and Brad. That's another thing. Brad Beal has essentially improved every single part of his game.
Yep.
He we know that he had that strong of a work ethic coming out of college, training with Drew Hanlon all of those years, and that's really taken form. And if Cam has that same mindset, and that same work ethic, he wants to improve every single part of his game. Wants to come back in go to an off season, pick one part of his game to improve at, come back the next year, show improvement, and kind of just keep repeating that process over like 5, 6 years, you will definitely have one of the more complete offensive players in the NBA, just given his pedigree. I mean, for crying out loud, he set ridiculous scoring records at Oak Hill as a
Yeah,
high school player.
he's their all-time the leading scorer in, and it only took him 3 seasons to do it.
Yeah,
Like that's insane.
that's
And
stupid.
I think that I saw that I think it was he won like 9 trophies while he was there. That's just insane.
So it I'll leave this as like a little bit of a preview or a teaser as to where I'm going to ultimately go with a tier system. But let's say that Cam Thomas is on a playoff team in the NBA, right? Do
Mhm.
you think he's one of the four best guys in a starting lineup down the line, or do you think he's like that fifth guy who maybe is like more of like a spot starter type guy, kind of surviving as like that fifth guy in the rotation? Where would you kind of see him fitting in and the kind of player that he might be down the road for an NBA team, given those two choices?
I definitely think it could be a top 4 guy on offense. I mean, defense definitely not, but yeah, offense. I think he could easily be a top 4 scorer.
I agree. I honestly agree, and that's why he keeps moving up in terms of where I would have him in like a tier system. And again, I'll be certainly talking about that in full on the podcast in the coming weeks when we get to that point. But yeah, he has only risen, and who knows, he may continue to rise. I don't know if I will maybe value him with like top 10 pick necessarily. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'll get that far, but lottery level, like if you're sitting there like 11 to 14 range and he's on the board, like he's incredibly enticing to pick and bring in because of the value that he can give you from day one and then what he could ultimately grow into. Absolutely. So let's move into the last guard that we're going to talk about this week. Again, same exact vein, combo scoring guard, James Booknight out of UConn. 6'5", 190 pounds he was listed at, 19 points per game in college, 45% from the field, only 29% from three. Um, the value that he brings really on offense, and there are plenty of mixtapes and offensive highlights on YouTube that you can watch about him being able to create his own shot. Really, his bread and butter is finding ways to score off the ball. And that does bode well for him coming into the NBA because any of these young guards that we're talking about, an NBA team generally isn't going to give them the ball and just ask them to create for like 10, 15 shots per game right off the bat, right? They have to come in and learn how to play within a team context. And then eventually they'll get their reps and they'll get their greater opportunities, I guess we'll call it. And Booknight's going to be able to come into the NBA and score in those off-ball situations. He was in the 98th percentile in the country on cuts. He was in the 87th percentile on putbacks. So showing the effort, getting into the offensive glass, and getting one of those extra possessions to convert for his team. The 84th percentile in isolation, we'll definitely touch on that. But the 82nd percentile on handoffs as well. So cuts, putbacks, handoffs. Three play types where he doesn't have to start immediately with the ball in his hands and create something for himself to make an impact. He's making an impact definitely with his ability to see what's going on all parts of the court, move at the right time, and get himself involved without having to dominate the ball. Simon, you and I were talking before the podcast. The Heat Booknight might be the highest out of all of these guys on your board. Why don't you tell my audience where you have him?
I currently have him seventh, right behind Jonathan Kaminga, and right in front of Moses Moody.
So that 6 to 10 range is definitely an interesting point for debate, especially on social media recently, in terms of where everybody kind of has and who everybody has in that grouping on their boards. But Book Night at 7, lay out your case, make your case, Simon. Why would you value Book Night seventh on your board?
So I think that he could easily be a 20-point per game scorer, but like you said, he is also just awesome off the ball. So he doesn't even have to be, the ball handler guy. He can just play off somebody, like play off of Luka Doncic or something like that, and still be a decent volume scorer.
What kind of defensive value do you think that he brings? And I know that you're not necessarily as high on defensive intangibles with a guard like Book Knight, who can definitely be a scoring threat in a variety of different ways. But what kind of value do you think he brings on that end of the court? Because that, to me, I think is what's going to separate him as like a full time, long term starter in the league. If he can provide similar value to a player who I've kind of used as a comparison for him the last few years now. I really see him as like this potentially souped up version of Gary Harris. That's kind of been my comparison for him. I think if a lot of that isolation scoring and some of that shot creation ability hits and he's able to create some of those similar looks that he did at UConn at the next level, then I think a souped up, a little more athletic Gary Harris is an apt comparison for him. But for all the things that Harris does in terms of offense, scoring off the ball, and in a lot of the same ways that Booknight actually does, he definitely brings value defensively in the backcourt. So, do you think that Booknight can have that similar effect?
So I see him as a Kevin Herter type defender, someone who isn't going to take the top guy, but
Yep.
could also play the passing lanes, block shots, just not be damaging on defense.
Yeah, and again, we see it with somebody like Booknight as well. When we've been talking about some of these guards, how do they fare defending in play types that we know are important to NBA teams? He was in the 73rd percentile defending in pick and rolls, 61st percentile defending in spot ups, and 56th percentile defending in isolations. So it's not like you put him on an island or you put him in this pick and roll set like he's going to be lost and he doesn't know what's going on. He definitely knows how to, at the very least, keep the matchup kind of even and he knows how to leverage some situations in his favor while not completely sinking a defense. So I agree. If he's able to add any sort of defensive value, then I definitely think he's a starter level guard in the league. That to me is really going to be what separates him, along with his ability to knock down catch and shoot threes. That is going to be something that he has to improve on at the next level. And that was really one of his actually, to be honest, other than some of the playmaking concerns, but I don't know if you're necessarily going to look at Book Night to make a bunch of plays for others, but the shooting, he was in the 36th percentile shooting off screens and the 14th percentile overall on spot up. So those play types that generally end in a jump shot, he actually didn't rate out very well, and he was in the 28th percentile on all jumpers and the 11th percentile in catch and shoot. So those are pretty poor metrics for a guard who you would think you watch some of those highlights, you see some of the shots he creates, you're like, oh my God, this guy's like a next level shot creator. He's going to be able to do all this, and this off the bounce. Well, that wasn't necessarily rated out the same way in terms of efficiency. He wasn't always the most efficient on in those types of looks. So it's definitely something that I think he needs to improve on. How do you feel, Simon, about his shot creation? I'm assuming you have to be high on him in that respect. If you have him seventh on your board, you're not quite as concerned as some of the numbers might lead you to believe.
So he shot 34% from deep last season, and he shot 82% from the line. So I think his the shooting will definitely come along. I mean, I don't think he'll be like a 39% from deep type shooter, but I think he'll. I don't think it'll be any sort of negative.
And by the way, we can talk about potential defensive impacts or lack thereof as well, or how much offensive value these guys are adding. All four guys that we've talked about today, they pretty much have player efficiency ratings of 23 or higher. Sharif was right there. It was like 22.9. That's close enough
Yeah.
to 23 for me. So these are guys who found ways to impact the game for their team at such a high level offensively that if they're able to have that same impact in the NBA game, you kind of do live with whatever they're bringing to the table at times defensively, just as long as they're not getting burned every single possession, then that's definitely starter level value that they're bringing to the table. And if you're looking at all of these guys at starters as starter level players at least some point down the line, then yeah, they need to be valued heavily in your evaluations and on your boards, and you need to be looking at them. I mean, this draft is so open, so fluid. There's so much talent that really, like, once you get past like that initial lottery wave of guys, you can make an argument for pretty much anybody like 15, 16 and on.
Yeah.
And I know that you're higher on some of these guys, Simon, that I might necessarily be at this particular moment in time, having some of these guys like firmly entrenched in the middle of your lottery. But yeah, you can quite literally make a case for almost anybody in the middle to late first round, depending on what your team needs. And as we keep seeing in the playoffs here, the more of these guards that you have that can create their own shot and be effective in multiple ways offensively, whether it's making a play for somebody else or being able to create your own shot in a variety of ways, the better off your team's going to be in these deep playoff situations where everything's on the line. The other team's going to be playing tight defense on you. What allows you to separate and still put points on the board and not come up empty handed on some of these possessions? So that's why we wanted to talk about these guys. That's why they're going to be so highly valued in this year's draft, and I'm excited to see all of them drafted. I'm very curious to see where some of these guys go, particularly Sharif, and definitely Cam Thomas. I'm going to be really interested to see where Cam Thomas goes and
Fall to
how
the
he's going.
Hawks. Fall to the
Man,
Hawks, please.
oh, man, I don't want to see that happen though, because
Oh, that'd
me
be
being the
awesome.
Sixers guy that I am, you guys already have enough freaking perimeter scorers that we have to deal with. We give you one more. I mean, we're really just tipping the scale in your favor at that point. But um, I think Trey would
Please.
love to play with somebody like Cam.
Yep.
Absolutely, he'd be zipping cross court passes to Cam all day long. And to your point, when we're talking about when you were kind of agreeing with me that Cam's going to get higher quality shots in the league because he doesn't have to do everything by himself off the bounce. If you have a playmaker like Trey next to you, able to just zip a pass from wherever to get you open for a shot, like yeah, Cam's definitely going to shoot better than 33% from three on those types of looks. I can guarantee you that. So maybe that is the best fit for him. I don't want to see it because I want my Sixers to do well. But yeah, that might be one of the better fits for him. But listen, Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. This was a blast. I'm glad that we finally got to talk about some of these guards, and I'll be very curious, like I said, to revisit some of these cases and where I ultimately value them when I do some of the tier pods that are coming up later in the rotation as we move closer to draft time. But where can everybody find you on social media, Simon? Where can everybody see what you're doing?
Just Twitter at Hawks Draft Nerd, and yeah, that's it. I mean, I just dropped my big board yesterday, I think. So yeah, I mean that's it. Don't overthink Cam. That's all I have to say to leave this podcast. Don't overthink
I
Cam
think
Thomas.
I think that's probably what you would say about all these guys in general, though.
Yes, that's true.
For a
Yeah.
point, just don't overthink
Don't
these scoring
overthink it.
guards. Yep, absolutely, I agree, man. Well, again, thank you everyone out there for listening to this episode of the podcast. You can find this show wherever you get your podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter at Draft Deeper. We are consistently having basketball conversations, whether you want to dump on one of my playoff takes, whether you want to argue with me about a prospect. I'm game for anything. I love talking to all you guys. It's what makes all of us smarter and better at evaluating and appreciating the game of basketball that we all love. So thank you all again for your wonderful support. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.